Jai Hind everyone. Now today we'll be discussing Ukraine conflict issues, what is happening there latest, and the relevance to India and its forces. We will discuss few issues which are in the domain of Indian public for a long period of time, like women in forces, as also concept of Naam, Namak, Nishan, and tour of duty a little bit at the end. So first of all, we will see the update on conflict, what's happening on ground in Ukraine, and we will be discussing the artillery battle in the next episode because artillery is playing very important role. We have seen in our previous episodes how these operations in planes have been conducted by the mechanized forces from a maneuver war from the Russian side. It is now turned into a war of attrition. Ukrainians are also slowly turning to war of attrition because of trench warfare. They are having a trench warfare at the moment. Now, in the second part, we will see the women in Russia-Ukraine conflict because Indian Army has been talking of women and role of women in the army for a long period of time. We'll just have a look at what's happening there on ground and how women are playing, what kind of a role they are playing there in Ukraine. Third, the concept of Naam, Namak, Nishan, why Ukraine and Russia they are fighting, and this concept and relating it to communities, people in Indian Army. And lastly, a bit about tour of duty. That is my own personal view. The soundbite which you have heard in the first part is kind of a jugalbandi in which the folk song of Ukrainian women is compared with the folk song of Haryani women. We'll talk about this later in this presentation. Let me align you to the map. This is Kharkiv here, and this is Severodonetsk. In this area, as already brought out, there is a contest going on. Ukrainian forces are trying to get back to the international boundary, whereas Russians are trying to hold this area basically to save their line of communication. Now, Ukrainians have been very successful in sabotaging the interiors of Russia at so many places. They have been able to create explosions, have destroyed a lot of arms producing centers, arms or ammunition producing centers. So that is one another worry, which is a big worry for Russians is lack of manpower. Another big worry now is basically Ukrainians' ability to sabotage, which is reducing their ability to resupply. So in this place, Russians are trying to maintain their lines of communication, and Ukrainians are trying to actually try and cut them off in this area so that from this area Russians are unable to take their supply lines to Izum and Vampil area. Now, not much of a change here. Russians pushed Ukrainians back and are retaining certain area. Ukrainians are contesting their advance. Kharkiv is being there are explosions in Kharkiv. Time and again there is a missile being struck, and Russians are basically maintaining this line. Now here, somewhere here, Russians have been able to cross the river at one place and have gone ahead. Now this is a very critical thing for Ukrainians. The moment Russians are able to cross the river and move ahead, their ability to move towards Kramatorsk and Sloviansk is there. Now that is what Russians are trying to do. They basically would like to take Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. Now that Severodonetsk is already captured in a way that, of course, there are some elements of Ukrainians there, but the resistance will break down the moment this area is captured by Russians. So this is what is happening in the north and in the area of Severodonetsk. You know the situation in Severodonetsk, which is, most of the area has been captured. Factory area, some elements of Ukrainians are there. Now these Ukrainians, the bridge had been blown up between Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, which is the twin city. However, Ukrainians by innovative methods are able to supply these people in Severodonetsk. The overall aim of Ukraine here is to try and hold and buy time and delay Russian advance as far as possible to build up the Western arms which are being given to them. Once they have the Western arms, the Western rocket launchers, the Western artillery which is being promised to them, then their ability to actually strike and hold Russians as also recapture areas is there. Okay, let me align you to this middle sector. This is Dnipro here, and this is Luhansk. You see just above this place was the Severodonetsk, and this is the enclave. Then, as you keep coming down, this is Donetsk, Mariupol, Melitopol, and Zaporizhzhia. Now, in this area, the defenses of Ukraine are the one of the best defenses which they had taken, because this is the area which is being contested since 2014, and there is largely a very little movement which takes place, except for Russians. Keep moving ahead. Certain amount of artillery is being brought upon the rocket launchers both ways. Similarly, Ukrainians are launching rocket launchers attacks from this area, and similarly, Russian artillery is trying to neutralize them. There are reports of both Ukrainians and Russians destroying a large number of RT pieces of each other. So, like American 155 have been destroyed by one of the platoons have been destroyed by Russians. Similarly, some elements of Russian artillery have been destroyed by Ukrainians. So this is a highly contested zone, and there is not much of a variation which is taking place. As you keep coming south, now in this area also Zaporizhzhia, earlier there was an attempt by Ukrainians to push the Russians back, which is now on hold, and basically there is a stalemate here. Let's see the southern sector now. This is Zaporizhzhia, which we have covered earlier. In this area, Russians are just below this line of the Dnipro River, and in this area, the Kherson area, they have crossed this line. And if you keep, there is Mykolaiv here, and as you onto the western side is Odessa. Now, reaching Odessa is difficult because there are multiple obstacle systems out there, and uh, see, people have been saying that Russians plan to actually extend it, but right from the beginning, I have said this area which has been captured, this side of the Dnipro, is the area which is, Russians are likely to uh, come to the negotiating table and probably going to barter towards, better management of area in the Donbass area. So this is very difficult for Russians to move because of number of obstacles which are there, and Russians' ability to actually now conduct operations because of lack of manpower, as also depleting resources, is difficult. Now, in this area, Ukrainians are trying their best to basically push the Russians back, and they have moved the Russians back a little bit, reaching quite closer, about 25 kilometers from Kherson, which has again now been pushed back by Russians and getting back to the same similar kind of line frame which was there. Another aspect which I wanted to study is what is the role of women in conventional wars. Now, in Ukraine, women are quite liberated. They are composed, about 15% of women are there in their armed forces, and they play a very important part in the overall society. However, uh, in the frontline roles, women have not been found to be effective. As also the war, you can see there is a very limited role which is being played by women in the overall fighting, where the fighting takes place. However, they are very important for the propaganda, information warfare. They have been, they are very important in logistics. Now, large number of women are there in their artillery who have also played a very important part in the war. So as of now, only if we restrict ourselves to the Ukrainian situation and the modern conventional war, the role of women in fighting is limited in spite of them being very liberated, very independent. So for a country like India, it has to seriously think on how women have to be employed in the armed forces. Though Indian women are very hardworking, and there are examples in other countries, wherein women have played a very important part in conflicts. But as of now, Ukrainian women, I would say, on a scale of 0 to 10, uh, as far as fighting is concerned, I will restrict them to about 3. Interestingly, while I was researching for this women in war in Ukraine, I chanced upon their folk singing, the women singing folk songs. And I was amazed because the tone and tenor of these folk songs are quite similar to the Haryanvi songs. I have left a small sound bite. You can listen to that. They are quite similar, which also, brought me to think that why nations fight and why there is, people are fighting like this, like Russia and Ukraine, when they are kind of similar stock, because I find that the similarity of Ukrainian songs has got a lot to do with similarity of songs in the folk songs of Haryana. In the context of Russia-Ukraine conflict, and one can find numerous articles on the same issue on the internet. I can read on this about the reasons to fight. The important issue remains: why are there wars? Of course, this is good for economy of some arms manufacturing and the light companies, and a big employment generation for people of the nation, especially for the less literate. Yet it drains the important resources to drive issues like healthcare, education, and infrastructure improvement. One can make out that powerful nations tend to fight wars away from their country and develop their arms industry to sustain both economic growth and power. Yet, time and again, it is proven now with Ukraine too. A nation cannot live in peace unless it is ready to fight a war. So, in overall analysis, the answer remains: a nation cannot avoid war. The only way it can is to grow economically strong and have a deterrence in place which has got a good return on investment. Yet the question for an individual soldier remains: why should he fight and give his life? In this context, use of religion, followed by similar notions like ethnicity, tribe, race, color, creed, etc., have been the biggest tool for a group of people to fight. Take example of my own community, which is spread across 2 countries and 3 religions: Hindu, Sikhs, and Muslims. They share the same DNA haplogroup, largely of the Pamir North region, sharing their DNA closely with Tajiks, Afghanis, Balochis, Sindhis, and others within India, to the extent that you can find instances wherein people from the same group of villages, separated during partition, squared off against each other in wars. In fact, they share less common denominator with communities living nearby in present-day India. Personally, for me, it was the Izzat back in village, which had large representation in forces which made me do things which otherwise one should not. Naam Namak Nishan, for soldiers on ground, it is a concept which binds them together through good and bad times. Yet they should think its relevance to the people who are into national and military strategy at higher levels. Today, globalization has made them have their kids study and work abroad, and the notion of time space restriction doesn't apply to their mindset. So, in overall sense, war is best avoided, and everyone in the nation should understand that. Issues like border conflicts are best avoided, especially when a nation has humongous issues like poverty and deprivation. Lastly, a word about tour of duty concept. I have been an early proponent of and supporter of this concept, which should make India stronger, and especially after the pandemic, when world economic scenario is and recession is looming large in front of the world. It's very important for the nation to look in real terms. It is not only good for the nation, but also for the aspirants who would be leaving force after 4 years. In fact, so many of them, large number of them, will a second lease of life, and some of them will rise in stature in real terms. they wouldn't have dreamt of in forces. This is a must concept for the nation, and military leaders at all levels should work hard to make it a success.